Continue our coverage online at cspan.org. The House is returning next for legislative work. Members this afternoon will consider two bills, one making it easier to drill for oil and gas on federal land, and also expanding the global HIV/AIDS program that was started under President George W. Bush. Live House coverage here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Reverend John Adams, First Baptist Church, Mentachie, Mississippi.
May we pray. Our Father, we bow before your majestic throne today. We acknowledge that you're in heaven and we are on your good earth. Our prayers are given for each one in this chamber, that your love and wisdom be in each life. Today we pray for our speaker and each legislator, that your hands will guide their hands. Father, I know today that the best thing that I can do for these men and women is to pray for them. Give them courage to make the right decisions. Let the laws coming forth from these hallowed halls be pleasing to you and be a benefit to our fellow man. Allow these leaders to have a breath of fresh air today and to have the Spirit of God's Son in helping others. We ask your blessings on our United States of America. In the name of God's Son we pray. Amen.
The Chair has examined a journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Now, the questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Nunley, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome to the House of Representatives this morning Dr. John Adams, Jr., who offered the prayer earlier. Dr. Adams is a native of Mississippi, and he's currently the senior pastor at First Baptist Church in Mantachie, Mississippi. He's joined by his wife, Darla K. Fuller Adams. Dr. Adams has served as senior pastor in churches in Mississippi, Texas, Colorado, and Arkansas. Dr. Adams has spoken throughout the South and around the country, sharing a 13-part series about the Judeo-Christian heritage of America. He also presently serves as executive director of the Moral Action of Mississippi and a national organization, the Moral Action of the Baptist Missionary Association. We are honored to have him here today, and we deeply appreciate his service to our Lord and to the people of Mississippi. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Mississippi yields back. The chair will now entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Now more than ever, Americans are feeling the pain from Obamacare. This law is hurting Americans with higher premiums and cancellation notices. If it is left in place, our country will suffer under the new wave of spending that it will create. This destroyer must be stopped. Just last week, the House passed a symbolic bill that merely nibbled at the edges of the problems caused by Obamacare. But you cannot fix a law that will cripple our economy, increase our nation's debt, and limit health care options for millions of Americans. I was one of only 4 Republicans to oppose this bill because we can't fix the President's broken promises in Obamacare. Instead, we must repeal Obamacare for good. I've introduced legislation, the Patient Option Act, that would do just that. Congress must stop wasting time to pass bills that keep Obamacare in place. We must repeal and replace this disaster immediately. The Patient Option Act is the solution.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The concept of a World Toilet Day can make children giggle, some adults blush, and others change the subject. But the title is designed to take a most serious subject head on. The world can no longer afford to be squeamish, make jokes, or change the subject about the fundamental issue of access to adequate sanitation. That's because 2.5 billion people live without it, which leads to 700,000 premature deaths each year, and it's getting worse. Instead of solving this global crisis, the number living without access has increased by 700 million people. Today, we want to renew our commitment to helping these unfortunate people around the world to have access to sanitation, which we all take for granted. I appreciate the Gates Foundation and other NGOs like Water Aid for stepping up to help solve the dilemma. And I call on my colleagues to support H.R. 2901, which Congressman Poe and I have introduced, the Water for the World Act, so that the United States can play a greater, more effective role to save lives around the globe.
Has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rodney from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, pays $540 a month for a family health insurance plan that covers his wife, his 16-year-old son, and himself. This plan works well for them and fits within their family budget. But Rodney received the same unwelcome news that has startled millions of other Americans. The health insurance he likes will be canceled because the suits in Washington think his preferred plan is lousy. The most similar government-sanctioned Obamacare plan will cost Rodney's family $1,139 each month, more than their mortgage payment. Understandably, Rodney is sickened by this news. I've worked very hard my entire life to take care of my family and provide for all their needs. How am I supposed to continue to support them with the government forcing me into a situation I cannot afford? Rodney closed his letter asking me If you do nothing else, please do everything in your power to make our voices heard. House Republicans are doing that every day for Rodney and Americans like him.
The gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise? Without objections, I recognize for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, despite all the hysterical comments like we just heard on the floor here today, it's important for people to know that in states where governors embrace the Affordable Care Act and set up a high-functioning website, the fact of the matter is enrollment is exceeding expectations. In Connecticut, where I'm from, on Friday we released figures. Over 13,000 have enrolled in the first 6 weeks, and the pace of enrollment is accelerating. In the last 2 weeks, they enrolled more than they had enrolled in the prior month. On Saturday, I was at an enrollment fair. There were 8 of them all across the state, a full waiting room of people waiting their turn like a deli counter to get their number to sit down and get help in terms of signing up with a plan. 20 minutes, that's all it took to sign up for a plan. I spoke to Mary Lynn Weaver from New London, Connecticut, who said, I'm finally going to have health insurance after 3 years of being without it. It took her 20 minutes to sign up for an Anthem Blue Cross Silver plan. The fact of the matter is, the message is, if you fix it, they will come. And that's what this Congress should be focused on, is fixing it so that waiting room of people like I saw in Norwich, Connecticut, are going to get help all across the country. It is time to help people get insurance, not to scare them and destroy a plan that provides them hope. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For purpose, the gentleman from Texas rise. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Baylor Regional Medical Center at Plano on their latest accolade, the 2013 Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, the nation's highest presidential honor for performance excellence through innovative practices and visionary leadership. For nearly a decade, Baylor Plano has provided North Texas with high-quality and compassionate care. Their superior patient satisfaction rate and dedication to training the best and brightest go unmatched. Baylor Plano's success and patient-centered care is a testament to the endless possibilities when you have choice and freedom on your side. It's an honor to congratulate Baylor Plano's employees, medical staff, and volunteers for doing their part to keep Texas' bigger and better reputation intact. I wish them continued success. God bless you, and I salute you.
Gentleman yields back. For purpose, the gentlewoman from Massachusetts rise.
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge House leaders to let us vote on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. In 1979, my late husband, Paul, was the first U.S. Senator to introduce legislation to ban job discrimination based on sexual orientation. I agreed with him then and feel just as strongly about ENDA today. Employees should be judged solely by their ability to do their job. After I was elected in 2007, I was proud to cast one of my first votes in support of the passage of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, an effort spearheaded by the relentless Barney Frank. While ENDA passed in the House of Representatives in 2007, it did not move in the Senate. But on November 7th, the U.S. Senate made history by passing ENDA. It is now time for the House to act, pass ENDA, and finally expand protections in order to prevent employment discrimination. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of dignity, justice, and equality, let us vote. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from New York rise.
The House for 1 minute.
Without objection, recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, orally administered anti-cancer drugs are becoming the standard care for certain types of cancer as a promising alternative to traditional chemotherapy, which is administered through the vein. It is also driving some of the most exciting research in fighting cancer. 35% in the oncology pipeline are oral chemo drugs. Unfortunately, insurance policies have not kept pace with the science. Typically, IV chemotherapy is covered as a medical benefit, while oral chemotherapy is covered under the prescription drug component. This creates a disparity in coverage and a financial disincentive to choose oral chemotherapy. Cancer patients should choose a course of treatment based on what they and their doctor believe will work best. That's why I've introduced the Cancer Drug Coverage Parity Act. It would require insurance plans to provide coverage for oral chemotherapy at a cost no less favorable than traditional chemotherapy. My bill has 68 bipartisan co-sponsors. I urge my colleagues to join us to support the development of these promising new treatments to patients who need them.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, even with the difficulties of the health care website, we're seeing great things coming out of this Affordable Care Act. Across the country, millions of people who lacked affordable health care options yesterday are checking out their new options today. This law is working. I continue to hear scores of success stories from California. Marilyn, who is a breast cancer survivor, was paying nearly $1,300 a month for her Anthem Blue Cross policy. Through Covered California, she is saving now more than $500 a month. And although the healthcare.gov website has had its problems that we are fixing, know that the California Exchange has become a model for the rest of the country. Early enrollment results demonstrate that Covered California is working and people are signing up. We led the nation in our readiness for this new law, and newly released numbers show that 131,000 Californians have already enrolled in new quality health plans on Covered California, more than any other state exchange. Rather than rooting for its failure, let's work together to make this a reality for all Americans.
The gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Address the House for 1 minute and ask unanimous consent, revise, extend, et cetera, et cetera.
And the gentleman is now recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I paused today to think about history. I thought a lot about the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination, and today's the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. And I thought I should bring some words to us from the address. The world can never forget what the soldiers at Gettysburg did. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work for which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great tasks remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from this earth. I'm proud to serve in this House where John Kennedy served. I'm proud to serve in this House where Abraham Lincoln served. It's my opinion that part of that work was providing equality and freedom and fairness, and I believe President Lincoln would support the Affordable Care Act and health care for all. I yield back the balance of my time.
Expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
To address the House for 1 minute.
The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, many of our constituents are still recovering from the reckless Tea Party government shutdown. Now it's time to do our job and pass a budget and help grow the economy and create jobs. Budgets are statements of our values and priorities as a nation. Our top priority in passing a budget must be to end the harmful, across-the-board budget cuts known as sequester. And we must extend emergency unemployment compensation, which millions of jobless workers and families rely on. This will end at the end of December if we don't do this. Although our economy has improved, there are still 4 million people in this country that have been unemployed for 6 months or more. These same individuals have already experienced reductions in their benefits due to sequestration and automatic SNAP food stamp cuts as of November 1st. Tea Party Republicans have refused to create jobs, they have cut job training, and now they are ready to pull the plug on this vital lifeline. This is morally wrong and economically stupid. I urge the budget conferees to extend the emergency unemployment compensation program for at least an additional year and to repeal the sequester. We need a fair and balanced budget that reflects our values.
The gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii rise?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow will mark the 50th anniversary of the executive order of President Kennedy, which established the Presidential Medal of Freedom. 500 exceptional individuals have received the award in these 50 years. Tomorrow, 16 will be honored, including President Bill Clinton. For us in Hawaii, it is noteworthy that the Hawaii-born president will be honoring Senator Daniel K. Inouye. In his press release, the president recognized the senator for his lifelong public service, including the highly decorated 442nd Regiment in World War II, for which he was awarded the highest military honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. It is, however, most noteworthy that when asked how the senator wanted to be remembered, Senator Inouye said, very simply, that I represented the people of Hawaii honestly and to the best of my abilities. I think I did okay, were his words. He was a true American, a humble man, and truly deserving of the highest civilian honor of this great country. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. For purpose of the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, rise.
Address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the fact that the robust provisions passed in the House were significantly reduced in the Senate, the people of the Virgin Islands are benefiting in many ways from the Affordable Care Act. As an example, a physician related to me that the insured 21 to 25-year-olds and preventive care without a copay kept her practice afloat, and the insurance rebate and tax credits for small businesses enabled her to provide insurance for her employees without requiring contributions from them. In addition, seniors and people with disabilities save an average of $647 on medicines. Health centers in my districts were able to expand space and services. Children with sickle cell, asthma, and diabetes could be insured. Every newborn will get an important home visit. And the new Medicaid dollars will enable us to provide coverage for up to half of our now uninsured. We still have work to do to ensure full access in the Virgin Islands and the nation, but the Affordable Care Act has already made a positive difference in the lives of many of our constituents. The ACA is helping Americans in all of the states and territories, and we will continue to build on its successes, not yield to Republican opportunism and obstructionism. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute. With unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the train wreck and broken promises of the President's Health Care Reform Act continue. You know, the gentleman from Connecticut earlier said that we were hysterical. Mr. Speaker, my constituents are hysterical about these broken promises. Alan from Harford County writes about his 31-year-old son. His 31-year-old son can't get a full-time job because employers won't hire people full-time because of the Affordable Care Act. He writes, quote, I'm writing today to voice my concern as a parent and to report that my 31-year-old son's health insurance premium will be tripling. Currently, he has his own Blue Cross Care First plan and was recently notified that it was going to be canceled, and his premium will go up from $200 a month to $600 per month. Mr. Speaker, this is a train wreck. Parents and families are hysterical. They can't afford a $600 premium for a single person working a part-time job. Canceled policies and skyrocketing premium costs are two broken promises. America deserves better.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, gentleman from North Carolina rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, my Republican friends continue to obsess with repealing a law that is making a difference and will make a significant difference in the years to come. I want to address some of the benefits that have accrued to my congressional district in North Carolina. 8,000 young adults now have health insurance through their parents' plan. 150,000 individuals now have health insurance that covers preventive services without any copays and coinsurance or deductibles. 138,000 residents of my district are saving money due to the ACA provisions that prevent insurance companies from spending more than 20% of their premiums on profits and overhead. Because of these provisions, 13,000 people in my district received a rebate of $87 per family last year, $158 per family the year before. Although Republicans have been relentless in their efforts to dismantle and discredit Obamacare, the facts are uncontroverted. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields back. What purpose, the gentlelady from Florida rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today we mark the 35th anniversary of the massacre of Jonestown. Prior to September 11th, this was the deadliest event in U.S. history, excluding wars and natural disasters. More than 900 innocent people were killed after being seduced by the charismatic but deeply disturbed Jim Jones. Mr. Speaker, among the dead was Congressman Leo Ryan, the first congressman to be assassinated in the line of duty. He went to Guyana out of the concern for the safety of his constituents there. Most of them were of African American descent. Congresswoman Jackie Spear, who was then on Congressman Ryan's staff, was shot 5 times and had to wait 22 hours for assistance. Today, I introduced a resolution honoring their extraordinary bravery and calling on the Speaker to establish protocols to memorialize members who die in the line of duty. Out of the tragedy of Jonestown, true heroes were revealed.
The gentlelady yields back. For purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise? Without objection, recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we all know about Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but I am proud to support Giving Tuesday, a national day dedicated to charitable giving and volunteerism. On December 3rd, Giving Tuesday will harness the collective power of charities, families, businesses, and individuals to transform how people think about, talk about, and participate in the giving season. Launched by the 92nd Street Y in New York City in the district that I am privileged to represent last year, Giving Tuesday inspires Americans to take action to improve their local communities and strengthen our country. Thousands of partners in all 50 states are joining in this national movement of individuals and organizations that believe that everyone, whether you're a large donor or an individual volunteer, has a role in helping to solve the challenges our communities face every day. Americans are the most charitable people in the world, and Giving Tuesday is a day for us as a nation to celebrate our spirit of generosity. I urge everyone to spread the word about Giving Tuesday to your constituents so together we can celebrate the giving season and aid the important work of charities and organizations. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose the gentleman from Missouri rise?
Mr. Speaker, to speak for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My son played basketball at Dillard University, and I went down to see his game as often as I could, and on one occasion we're driving around in his car. We're in a busy intersection and the car stops. I didn't know what was wrong, but eventually I realized that he simply didn't have gas in it. I was not happy, but I didn't stand outside of the car and just continue to talk to him about the fact that the car stopped running and needed gas. What we did is that we tried to get some gas, get the car out of the busy intersection because a lot of people were trying to get by. It would have been of no value for me to stand there and lecture him or talk about how horrible the situation was. We wanted to fix it. And that's the same thing with the Affordable Care Act. There are some problems. I think it would be crazy for anybody to say there are not problems. But the law has already been passed by Congress, signed by the President, and upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. We would be infinitely better off if we gave our time to repairing the problems that are there as opposed to standing in the intersection talking about how bad it is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired.
There's a TV in there. TV in there.
Already. Life is good. Let's rock. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 419 for its immediate consideration.
The clerk report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 75, House Resolution 419. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolves into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 1965, to streamline and ensure onshore energy permitting, provide for onshore leasing certainty, and give certainty to oil shale development for American energy security, economic development, and job creation, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this section and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources now printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-26 shall be considered as adopted in the House and in the Committee of the Whole. The bill as amended shall be considered as the original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such further amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill as amended to the House with such further amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended, and any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 2728 to recognize states' authority to regulate oil and gas operations and promote American energy security, development, and job creation. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this section and shall not exceed 1 hour, with 40 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources, and 20 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources now printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-27 shall be considered as adopted in the House and in the Committee of the Whole. The bill as amended shall be considered as the original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such further amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill as amended to the House with such further amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended, and any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the, you guys settled on who you're going to do this one. You're actually going to do it. So the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During the consideration of the resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. I ask that all members have 5 legislative days during which they may revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
This resolution provides for a structured rule for the consideration of H.R. 1965, Federal Lands, Job, and Energy Security Act, as well as for consideration of H.R. 2728, the Protecting States' Rights to Promote Energy, American Energy Security Act. The rules provided for each bill to receive 1 hour of general debate, equally divided, controlled by the chairman and ranking member, a minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources, except that on H.R. 2728, the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will control 20 minutes of the hour that is provided. The rule makes in order 8 amendments for H.R. 1965, 5 amendments for H.R. 2728. In both cases, the number of amendments to be offered by Democrats outnumbered those offered by Republicans. A number of those amendments which were filed and not made in order violated the House rules, either by not being germane, by violating cut-go. So this is a very fair and a generous rule, and will provide for a balanced debate on the merits of these important pieces of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand before the House to support this rule, as well as the underlying pieces of legislation, which are both important bills aimed at making the United States more energy independent. I appreciate the hard work of the sponsors, Mr. Lamborn of Colorado, Mr. Flores of Texas, as well as the work of the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, as well as that of the chairman of the Science Committee, gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith. These are significant pieces that will move our nation forward, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Utah reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
I thank the gentleman from Utah for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. Mr. Speaker, for this body to spend the final week before a week-long break, one of the final weeks of the year, the third to last week of the legislative year, considering messaging bills that aren't going anywhere, is a disservice to this country, and one of the reasons that this institution is as unpopular as it is. Rather than taking on immigration reform, rather than protecting Americans from employment discrimination, both bills that passed the Senate with strong majorities, including many Republicans, we are instead debating a bill that moved backwards rather than forwards. H.R. 1965 and H.R. 2728, the Federal Lands, Jobs, and Energy Security Act and the so-called Protecting States' Right Act to promote energy security, circumvent future federal regulations designed to keep people safe and healthy by handing over jurisdiction to states that have any guidance, even a few words of guidance, regarding hydraulic fracturing. We'll be talking about the example and what this means in my home state of Colorado in a few moments. But neither bill will become law. Unlike immigration reform, unlike ENDA, which would end workplace discrimination against gays and lesbians across our country, these bills will not become law. Similar legislation to H.R. 1965 was considered last Congress. This legislation was opposed by the administration, was not brought up by the Senate. And yet here we are debating it again here in the House of Representatives when we have real business to take care of. These are not the issues, Mr. Speaker, that my constituents are calling in demanding that I take action on. Mr. Speaker, they're demanding that I work to fix our broken immigration system. They're demanding that I work to balance the budget. They're calling in demanding that we work to improve upon health care delivery in this country. And yet instead, we're discussing bills that are detrimental to the economy of the district that I represent and destroy jobs. Let me discuss H.R. 1965 first. This bill's central premise is to allow oil and gas companies to drill wherever and whenever they want to drill on public lands. This bill is completely irresponsible and prioritizes the needs of the oil and gas industry over every other use of our public lands, including the drivers of jobs in my district, hunting, fishing, skiing, and off-road vehicle recreating. This bill sets arbitrary deadlines for the BLM to approve drilling applications and requires the BLM to lease at least 25% of lands nominated by the oil and gas industry each year. In addition, the underlying bill offers millions of acres of public lands for lease to companies that are trying to develop a fuel source that has not even proven to be viable, oil shale, without regard to the impact on water or on our local economy or environment. I represent the district that includes popular destinations like Vail and Breckenridge and Winter Park, Colorado. People from across the country come to enjoy our skiing in winter, our outdoor recreation, our hunting, our fishing, whitewater rafting. When you use areas of land for extraction and you create oil rigs, the heavy truck traffic and roads associated with the extraction industry, people are less likely to want to come visit for these other purposes. It will hurt our ability to attract tourists from the rest of the country if we don't have the adequate safeguards around the federal lands, which are part of Eagle and Summit County, and which our economy relies on. Now, on H.R. 1965, I did offer several amendments to try to improve these bills, but only one of my amendments was made in order under this rule. I'm pleased that at least my amendment with Representative Jared Huffman is in order, which requires the National Academy of Sciences to study and report to Congress about the impact of flooding on the oil and gas facilities and leaks and spills from tanks, wells, and pipelines. My district was recently fell victim to horrendous floods. We call it our 100-year flood in Boulder, Larimer, and Weld County. A number of drilling operations were impacted, and we're continuing to assess the damage, not only, of course, with regard to drilling operations and potential contamination, but, of course, our people are digging out with regard to their homes and their offices as well. September floods in Colorado caused unprecedented levels of destruction to thousands of oil and gas facilities in northern and eastern Colorado. As a result, over 43,000 gallons of oil and over 26,000 gallons of produced water spilled from the tanks, wells, and pipelines into the floodwater. That's why I joined Representative DeFazio, the ranking member of Natural Resources, in sending a letter on September 25th to Chairman Hastings requesting a hearing to fully understand the consequences resulting from the flooding. Now, that hearing hasn't been scheduled yet, but I'm hopeful that we can resolve this issue, hold congressional hearings, make sure that not only insofar as this issue affects my district, but also affects other districts that might be subject to flooding that house drilling operations. With regard to the oil shale amendment, I'm disappointed that the other amendment I offered with Ms. Napolitano was not made in order. It would have simply required a study. The U.S. Geological Survey would have studied the impacts of oil shale leasing on the quantity and quality of water available in the West. Now, my friend from Utah knows that water in the West is a very important thing. It's, you know, gold's for looking at and water's for fighting over. And frankly, when we look at the impact and the potential impact that a very heavy use of water would have and some of the extraction techniques that are being explored for oil shale production, we need to look at the impact that that would have on water that we need for agriculture, for homeowners, for recreation. And a simple study would be a first step in doing that. Unfortunately, under this rule and this closed process, we were not allowed to bring forth this amendment to discuss a study of how oil shale production would affect water usage. Many of the test processes use enormous amounts of water to develop oil shale, and it's very concerning because the largest known deposits of oil shale are in the Green River Formation, which include portions of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, all three of our states experiencing over the last several years drought conditions and have scarce water resources relied upon by our residents and by our farmers. 30 million users of water, including farmers, ranchers, and municipalities, depend on water from the Colorado River Basin. My amendment would ensure that we have a better understanding of how a growing water oil shale use could pollute or otherwise impact through the quantities used the water available for other purposes. Now I'd like to turn to H.R. 2728. Hydraulic fracturing or fracking is a national issue. It's something that we need to address here in Congress. It's something my constituents are demanding of me that we address here in Congress. But H.R. 2728 is not what my constituents had in mind. In this election this month, earlier here in November, 4 of the 5 largest municipalities in my district, Fort Collins, Boulder, Lafayette, and Broomfield, passed measures that put bans or moratoriums on fracking. Never before in my time in public service have I ever seen an issue that has been on the #1 issue on the ballot of 4 of the top 5 municipalities, and I should add it was scheduled to be on the ballot of the 5th. But it was deferred. The petitions to put it on that ballot were deferred, and we expect it will be on the ballot in Loveland at some point if the citizens continue with their push for an initiative there. Now, we've seen tremendous growth in natural gas development due to fracking and directional drilling in the last decade alone, and that's a great thing. It's a great thing for American energy independence. It's a great thing for American manufacturing. It's a great thing for reducing our energy costs. In Colorado alone, 50,000 wells have been drilled. And many more have been drilled nationally. These drilling activities, however, in a district such as mine, a district that is an extraction district, is occurring very close to where people live and work and where they raise families. And yet our state doesn't have any meaningful regulation to protect homeowners. Now, it meets the definition of having fracking rules. It certainly does. Unfortunately, the fracking rules are overseen by an oil and gas commission that is heavily influenced by the oil and gas industry. They don't have at their disposal the independence or the ability to enact real penalties for violations of our laws. And their charge is not, first and foremost, to protect homeowners and families and health. And that's led to this backlash, which is why even very conservative towns in my district, one of the towns that had a 5-year moratorium on fracking, elected a very conservative mayoral candidate by a 60-40 margin, which is not unusual for this town. So these are folks who are fundamentally conservative, voting for a conservative candidate for mayor who won, and yet at that same election, that same year, they passed a moratorium on fracking in Broomfield County. This is of great concern to the people in my district. The growth of fracking without common sense federal guidelines, without common sense state guidelines, has caused an enormous amount of friction between the American dream of homeowners in my district and our nation's need for energy. State and local rules are an important part of the equation, but we also need standards at the federal level, particularly as relate to federal lands, namely BLM lands, which are an important part of the equation to address impacts that go beyond any particular community, such as keeping our air free from pollution, keeping pollution out of our lungs, and our waterways and our drinking water. Now, some state and local laws addressing oil and gas extraction are woefully unprepared. The extraction industry hit before they had the chance to even create a local regulatory framework, or they have one that is woefully outdated and relates to the extraction technologies that were prevalent decades ago rather than the new extraction technologies that are being deployed today. Colorado is trying to update its oil and gas rules, but they really haven't done anything to create a meaningful framework to protect homeowners and families, which is why 4 of the 5 largest municipalities in my district have either banned or put a moratorium on fracking. Now, we have a state issue, and the state has actually threatened to sue some of these same municipalities for that ban. That's not a federal issue. But this has been an enormous issue in my district. The citizens of my district want more protection, not less, when it comes to fracking. The industry reaction has been extremely counterproductive. The desire for my citizens to see more protection, somehow the industry interprets this as the citizens need more information or need more marketing about how great fracking is. That's not what they need. They got plenty of that. The opponents of these ballot initiatives, the oil and gas industry, spend millions of dollars educating my constituents about how wonderful and harmless fracking is. That's not what they're asking for. If we could take some of that money and instead apply it to recapturing gases from the well sites and ensuring that we have closed systems for the water recovery, instead of the marketing campaigns, we would actually make progress with regard to increasing consumer confidence and the confidence of my citizens in the process. But that's not what we've seen to date, and this bill will not help bring it about. For almost 5 years, I've represented Colorado's 2nd Congressional District. In that time, I've witnessed exponential growth in natural gas extraction in and around our district. I've met with too many families and communities that have been forced from their homes and devastated by nearby fracking activity. Fracking has occurred hundreds of feet from homes, schools, and playgrounds. I've been powerless to stop it. We tried to ask oil and gas company not to frack near a school in Erie, Colorado, Red Hawk Elementary, but the response that I got from my office after 2 letters continued to just to be a formulaic response from their attorneys that we have the right to frack here and we will. And many families are fleeing those communities, not because of lack of information, not because the oil and gas company hasn't done everything they can to have wonderful ambassadors in our community, creating a lot of great literature, advertising all over our airwaves. That's not why families are fleeing. They're fleeing because they don't want to live next to an oil rig or have their kids go to school next to a fracking pad or oil rig. And that's just common sense. There's no amount of marketing or information that will change their minds. And that's this fundamental flaw in the reasoning process that many in the oil and gas industry have had to date. Now, while I've heard many stories from families about getting fracked, and as a result have introduced the BREATHE Act in the last Congress and the FRAC Act requiring disclosure of fracking fluids, removing the exemption that fracking has from the Clean Air and the Clean Water Act, the small site exemption. I, unfortunately, got to experience fracking firsthand here in this last year. And I'm going to further yield to myself at in the well. So for more than a decade, I've had a peaceful family farm, about 50 acres, near Berthoud, Colorado, where my father-in-law lives. That's our house there. And fracking, without any notice to us, because of course it wasn't required under state law, occurred hundreds of feet from our home. In July, overnight, without any warning, a towering drill rig arose, literally across the street from where my father-in-law lives. You can see it right here. The sounds of the 24-hour-a-day and night operation led us to invite my father-in-law to have to stay with us in Boulder in our apartment on our couch during the active phase of the drilling process. The rig was spewing black smog and making loud noises at all hours of the day. And when the drilling rig went up without notice or warning, our little dream and our life became a nightmare and was thrown into turmoil. Last night at the Rules Committee hearing, Chairman Sessions and Chairman Hastings spoke about a website, www.fracfocus.org, that supposedly reveals all the chemicals used during the fracking process. But FracFocus is actually not revealing at all. It gives operators sole discretion to decide what information that they display and what they don't display. This is actually an example of a well. This is the one that is very close to our house, and you will see that, of course, many of the ingredients of the fracking fluids are completely non-controversial. We know they're largely water, sand, and quartz. We're not talking about that. That's not the issue. But if you will see, they have proprietary listed next to several vague terms. They have surfactants here, proprietary. So people in the neighborhood don't even know what environmental contaminant to measure for or look for. Again, from a marketing perspective, the oil and gas companies are saying it's not leaching into groundwater, there's not surface spills, but they at the same time are refusing to provide the information that would allow the independent verification of their claims and safety. And when I looked up the drilling site near my house on FracFocus, there were many ingredients that were listed as proprietary, including surfactants and polymers. And because of the lenient policy of FracFocus, the company that drilled near my house withheld the only information that we were actually interested in terms of what was being used in the ground. We need to look at a common sense approach to fracking. The constituents of my district are demanding it. we could have voted on such a balanced approach to fracking. I introduced as an amendment to H.R. 2728 the BREATHE Act. The BREATHE Act was identical to a bill that I introduced earlier this Congress. It would have reversed the oil and gas industry's loophole to provision in the Clean Air Act that protects the public from small air pollution sources that might individually be de minimis, but in the aggregate release large volumes of toxic substance into the air. And we have to talk about the concentration of this operation. Weld County, Colorado, close to 50,000 wells. Now again, any particular fracking pad, the emission profile is small, but you have a number, a dozen, 2 dozen, 100 in a limited area, the emission profile is going to look a lot more like a factory or even a coal-burning plant than it does something that can be rounded down to zero. We need to look at the fact that the concentration of thousands of wellheads in a very limited geographic area has a profound potential impact and cumulative impact on air quality that affects our health and our quality of life. My amendment is critical because there's significant evidence that oil and gas wells and their associated infrastructure, including heavy truck traffic and diesel engines, contribute to air pollution. Chemicals such as benzene and volatile organic compounds and methane are associated with oil and gas production sites and should not be subject to an exemption from the Clean Air Act. Despite the growing proof that oil and gas industry causes air pollution, oil and gas operators are still exempt from the basic federal protection afforded by the Clean Air Act. I offered this amendment and introduced the BREATHE Act because people who live near oil and gas developments deserve the protections of the Clean Air Act, just as other Americans do who live near factories, just as other Americans do who live near coal-burning plants. We have 55 sponsors for the BREATHE Act, and yet it has not received a hearing or a markup, and on a party line vote yesterday in the Rules Committee, was not allowed to be considered as an amendment to this bill. Another amendment I helped offer to the underlying measure would also improve the legislation. The amendment I offered with Mr. Holt allows the Secretary of Interior to issue regulations to minimize fugitive methane emissions on public lands. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas that often leaks during the drilling and transportation of oil and gas. In fact, methane leaks are so common in oil and gas drilling that we have rural areas in the upper Green River Basin of Wyoming that have recorded higher concentration levels than the worst pollution days in downtown Los Angeles. Fortunately, there are already control technologies available to minimize air pollution in operations, and if the oil and gas companies would use just some of the money that they spend on lobbying and on marketing and on all the wonderful advertising that they're doing on our airwaves in Colorado, and instead upgrade their facilities to recapture methane, I think we could actually see some progress on this issue. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment when it comes up for consideration later in the afternoon. Mr. Speaker, the American people are calling for real solutions in Congress. The people of the 2nd Congressional District are for an all-of-the-above approach to energy. We're for solar. We're for wind. We're for oil. We're for gas. We're for hydro. And we want to make them all work. But just as there would be a zoning process around creating a windmill in a residential neighborhood that's 100 feet tall right near your home, there should be a zoning process around the extraction of oil and gas, especially near where the constituents of my district live and work. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a messaging bill that might help the majority's relationship with oil and gas companies, but what we really need is a balanced approach that ensures that we can develop our domestic oil and gas resources in a way that doesn't destroy jobs in districts like mine and protects the health of Americans across our country. These bills fall short on that account, and despite our effort to amend them, the rule doesn't allow many of the most important amendments that would remove the exemption from the Clean Air and Clean Water Act and ensure that we have an extraction industry that is consistent with the public health. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Speaker, the rule that we have before us is about two bills. The first bill deals with fairness for those who live in public land states as to the ability to process oil and gas leases. Second bill deals with fracturing of oil. That is a policy that started in the 1940s in the state of Texas, so I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, who is the sponsor of the second bill, to discuss that particular portion.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank Mr. Bishop for the time to discuss this rule and the important underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, everyone, Republicans and Democrats, like to talk about clean, affordable natural gas. Yet the Bureau of Land Management has proposed duplicative federal regulations on the very technology that has facilitated the shale energy revolution, and that's hydraulic fracturing. States have a proven record in regulating hydraulic fracturing for over 60 years. Obama administration officials are already on the record stating that hydraulic fracturing is safe and that states have a strong role in its regulation.